Welcome back to that, from that quick coffee break we had, but I appreciate you coming back. This next panel is actually one of my favorites that we do here at CFS, because at the heart of aviation safety is a simple but vital connection. Pilots and controllers working together and trusting each other. Now today's panel, Roger That, Trust in the Pilot-Controller Connection, dives into issues we all face. Turbulence, go-arounds, weather, traffic, and how collaboration and this conversation makes the difference. Please welcome one of our moderators, Steve Jangelis, Aviation Safety Chair, Airline Pilots Association International, Jesse Strickland, Houston Center, NATCA, Captain Brian Townsend, Air Traffic and Procedures Safety Representative, Allied Pilots Association, Saja Cox, Will Rogers, Air Traffic Control Tower, NATCA, and our other moderator is Brad Wilcko, from Southern California TRACON, NATCA's Pilot Controller Liaison.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. Is everybody enjoying CFS so far? End of a long week? Excellent. So as Don brought up today, our panel, we're going to talk about a lot of the issues that come up. And my role with NATCA is the Pilot Controller Liaison. There's a lot of direct interaction between myself, like Steve at ALPA, he's their safety chair, and the other unions, APA, Brian is American rep for their union. So there's a lot of interaction that we have about things that you all see at work and things that they're seeing on their end as well. So we like to get together and put this out, and we have, I think, 5 or 6 topics today that we're going to touch on, but at the end of this, if we have enough time for Q&A, the Slido app, as I'm sure you've all been using all week, is available, and those questions will come up. So any questions you have, go ahead and submit them on that app, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. That being said, after this, at 1 p.m. up in Skyview 5 and 6, we are going to have a pilot controller breakout that is 2 hours long. So any questions that you all submit to this, we will be taking those upstairs with us. So I invite you to join us up there again, 1 o'clock, Skyview 5 and 6. Let's get rolling. So Saja, can you explain to us how a pilot-initiated go-around versus a controller-initiated go-around impact the tower environment differently from one another?
Of course, Brad. So I just want to start with the connotation that go-arounds are negative. Every time you hear a go-around, it's usually, oh, was that supposed to happen? Or go-arounds are completely normal, completely safe, and air traffic controllers experience them every day. I would say they're less frequent for pilots, and we as air traffic controllers get to practice them more real time. As an air traffic controller, when I initiate a go-around, I have a plan. I have plan A, B, C, etc. I know the traffic that is in my airspace, and that's the way I work that specific go-around. If it's an unplanned go-around initiated by the pilot, I am now reacting. As air traffic controllers, that's what we're used to. We're used to the unknown, so we practice those unusual situations. But when it's initiated by the pilot, one of the things that we need to know is why. Why are we going around? If I have a final full of aircraft, are you going around because it's an unstable approach? Are you going around because you had wind shear? Because those things will determine my next steps. I'm fortunate enough to work at a tower TRACON, which we consider an up-down in the industry, so I see both sides of the coin. In the tower, when I send someone around, depending on airline, depending on type of aircraft, we have 2 options. They can stay in the tower pattern and remain with me, traffic permitting. If my final's backed up, that's probably not something I'm going to do. I'll send them back out to approach. At Will Rogers, we have automatic releases. That gives me a little bit of flexibility with my go-around. If that aircraft is on an instrument approach, there are published missed procedures. We don't use those anymore. Each airport and airflow, their design is different. So again, depending on the flow that you're in, depends on the heading, and again, the traffic that I have in my airspace. If I have a helicopter off of the departure end, I'm gonna need that airplane to turn left or right, or I'm gonna need that helicopter to climb and separate with altitude. So from the controller perspective, a pilot-initiated go-around is very labor-intensive. I'm working the traffic not only in my airspace, but now I'm what we call booping down when you call the TRACON on the line, the landline. I'm coordinating with ground control, possibly the tower CIC, which is the controller in charge, to help me do all of these things while I work the traffic. But during that time, you need that communication. They have to know my plan.
So one thing I do want to ask, I'll direct this to you, Brian. So go-arounds, as we talked about, they've kind of become, for us TRACON folks and tower folks anyway, the terminal people, they're kind of I don't want to say normal occurrence, but they happen daily. In your career, over 15,000 hours, how many times have you had to do a go-around while flying?
Easily could count on one hand the number of go-arounds, other than in the simulator, because we do, of course, receive regular recurrent training, and there is a lot of emphasis on go-arounds. But that's one of those things I would say for the average pilot, since it does happen so infrequently, there can be a startle factor, and especially if it's ATC initiated. If it's one thing where we call the go-around because of a missed approach on the ILS, wind shear, and other anomalies, generally we will try to shoot that out to ATC on the go-around. I realize it doesn't always happen because we're definitely focused on flying the aircraft, but we do put some emphasis on that, is to at least let ATC know why we're going around. But when it's ATC initiated, and I talked about the startle factor a little bit, and hopefully yesterday some of you on the breakout sessions got to see the go-around video that American Airlines has produced from our LOSA and LIT folks, because it really does give you a good perspective as far as what's going on in the flight deck. And there are hands and arms moving all over. Both pilots are talking. Each one has their own specific role and responsibility. I know on my aircraft it's go around toga, flaps 20, thrust set, positive rate, gear up, set missed approach altitude at 400 feet. You're either heading or LNAV, and then of course as you accelerate, you're cleaning up the wing. All these things are going on, and both pilots are each saying a part of that. It's not one pilot doing all the talking, one pilot doing all the actions. It's a combination of both. So when you give us that go-around, we've most likely had already briefed the published missed approach procedure, and that's basically what's in our heads as far as what we plan to fly, knowing that you could give us different control instructions, and you hit it right on the head. And I don't think all pilots understand that, at least in this country, most published missed approaches don't fit the airspace, doesn't fit your traffic, so you'll rarely have us fly that procedure. You'll give us something different. And now that's when it gets a little bit sticky, because if that instruction comes right after the go-around instructions and we're busy with all those other call-outs, it's very easy to miss the heading you gave us or the altitude. Yeah. And now we're adding more communications, plus you're probably talking to other aircraft at the same time. The good news is we do have a work group, national work group that came together out of the commercial aviation safety team tasking, based on trying to improve the whole go-around event for pilots and controllers. The team is the GAC, as we call it, the Go-Around Coordination and Communication Work Group. It's chaired by Eric Morris at Delta Airlines and your own Jen McCoy at NATCA. They're doing a great job. They're putting together a series of recommendations that hopefully will add some best practices on both sides of the microphone to make your average go-around event be a little less intense. So stand by for those recommendations coming hopefully in the not too distant future.
Right, and I think so the big takeaway and the topics that we're going to go through is things that are common or normal to us as controllers are not common to pilots. Like Brian said, and he can count on his hand after 15,000 hours flying airplanes, how many times they actually do a go around. So, and there's situations that pilots have that are normal and routine to them that they're very different for us. And that's why you kind of want to segue and just show you all this afternoon with the limited amount of time we have on what things look like for pilots, what they look like for controllers, because there's we need to build that understanding, so when we're on frequency or keyed up on the mic, that we understand, have at least a little bit of understanding on what's actually going on the flight crew. But Steve, I'll go ahead and kick it over to you. And
absolutely, thank you. Appreciate being here. John Murdoch said I had earned my keep, get a free meal, so I'm happy to be moderating today, and thanks for the opportunity.
We just
Brian,
gotta go.
you know,
So we're working
flight
on
crews and
between
controllers
everybody,
are
so
team
we don't get
people, right? We like to make sure we get the mission complete. We try to do it.
Oh, Mike.
There's a mic issue.
Can't hear me?
Yep.
What now?
Yeah.
Say again?
It's been for years.
I think we're on and off here. All right, now working. Okay. Do you hear me now? All right, great. I didn't say anything important anyway. Anyway, happy to be a part of this group. You know, one of the things.
Steve.
I'm getting set up here, aren't I?
Yeah.
I'll just yell really loud. How about that? Is that better? Okay, calm down. There comes a time when we are can-do people, controllers and pilots. And Brian, is there ever an episode where
It's doing it again.
Yeah.
anybody have a hand mic? I can.
Steve, you just have to sit on my lap. We'll share the microphone together.
If I
Same
take
as
the
the
podium,
cockpit, I
if I
assume,
take the
right?
podium,
Very
you're never
close,
going to see
very
me sit
close.
down. Things happen, right? Yeah.
Okay,
here
here
we
we go.
go.
Help is on the way.
Back up.
Thanks, Butters.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, thank you. I was in the karaoke bar last night. You might have heard me, and that's probably why half the room is empty. Thank you for the microphone. You know, we're can-do people. We try to do the right thing, get it done as quickly and as safely as possible. But is there ever a time, Brian, when pilots should or could say unable?
I would say if you ask any of the pilots in this room over the course of your career, looking back, how many times where you accepted a clearance from the controller and after the fact said, I wish I hadn't have done that, or knew in the back of your mind, this might be tough. But as you said, we're all trying to work together. We know that the controllers trying to move the aircraft, keep the runway loaded, and I think pilots overall are conditioned to try to help out. I realize there's some exceptions out there where you probably hear unable all the time, but for the most part, we're all working together. And unfortunately, to our detriment, there are situations where we've accepted that clearance and it didn't have a good outcome. Could have resulted in an unstable approach. And I think one of the most common ones is where we accept a clearance that brings us in maybe a little too high, a little too fast. And to the credit of Boeing and Airbus, they have developed very efficient aircraft. But unfortunately, those aircraft want to fly. They don't always want to come down. So we can either slow down or go down, but in a lot of cases, we can't do both at the same time. And that's what we struggle with. And now you look at the PBN procedures that we have in place almost everywhere in the NAS. I mean, it's very common now, and for a good thing, because it acts as a traffic management tool for you. It lets us fly more efficiently, save fuel, all those great things with the procedures. But at the same time, if you're in a situation where you need to shortcut us, again, that can cause a detriment to where now we're off profile and we have to do something to try to get on profile. And we do have tools in the toolbox, the speed brakes, you can extend the gear early, but as I mentioned before, with the efficiency of the aircraft, we can be somewhat constrained in using some of those tools at times, even extending the flaps, which makes it more of a challenge. But as pilots, overall, I think we do need to do a better job of letting you know as soon as possible that we're unable. For example, on a departure procedure that maybe has some published altitude constraints, depending on the FMS you have in your aircraft, and I think some do a better job of predicting what altitude you'll be at that fix, and even on the ground you can look and check it. But really until the aircraft is airborne and flying, you're in the particular wind fields and so on, you don't always get that true picture of what it will actually cross that constraint at. And then that sometimes leads to the last minute unables from the pilots. where maybe they're just a few miles from that fix and they say, hey, we're going to be unable that altitude constraint. And of course, I know for you that can throw you in a situation where you may have loss of separation. And we do try to emphasize to the pilots from time to time that you can't wait till the last minute. You have to give the controller some advance notice so that they have the opportunity to make changes and obviously prevent that loss of separation.
So, Jesse, for you in the center environment, when you give a crossing restriction or some sort of restriction, again, the flight crew has to type that in, right? They're going to accept the clearance initially, but then they're putting it in the FMS or FMC. So sometimes the computer's going to come back and say, we can't do that. But when that happens in the center environment, you have a plan A, B, C, D. I mean, what happens to you when you're planning on someone to make a restriction or whatever clearance you gave them and then they can't do it?
Yeah, so I think that unable is the word that no one wants to hear, pilots or controllers. It's the worst word in our industry. But back in the day when I was training, my trainer told me, she said, every clearance you give, act like the pilot is going to say unable or they're going to mess it up. So we always have a plan B. So I didn't.
Makes me feel kind of sad a little bit.
Yes, but it's to cover ourselves, right? So we never just have plan A, we have plan B and plan C, and if it gets really bad, you might have D, E, or F. But we're always ready to transition. But you said it really well. Give us the time as soon as you realize, like, hey, I'm not going to be able to make that restriction or whatever it is, so we can't have time to go to plan B because there may be extra coordination involved for us or something to execute that plan. We know what we can do. We just have to be able to execute it.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to jump to Slido real quick because our third question is actually about emergencies. And so, Brian, the question that came up is why do pilots hesitate to declare an emergency or feel frustrated if ATC does? And the question that we're going to discuss are how rare emergencies are. Again, how many in your career have you had?
Maybe one or two.
Yeah. So again, very rare situation. And again, at work for controllers, we see them all the time, right? But they're rare, Brian. So we don't ever want to have an emergency, both on the flight crews or the controllers. We don't want to ever have to worry about that. But when they do happen, can you quickly walk us through what exactly is going on the flight deck and the increase in workload that the flight crew has on themselves while you're working through a situation?
Absolutely, and again, I'll highlight yesterday from one of the breakout sessions with Delta Airlines showing some great slides and an example in what all the crew is doing. So hopefully some of you got to see that in here. But there is a lot going on, and fortunately with our training emphasis on many types of emergencies, you could almost say it's somewhat routine, and that says a lot for the type of training that we get. There's obviously a lot of emphasis on sort of following that script, the roles and responsibilities, so that we don't make any errors along the way and have a successful outcome. But for any given emergency, at least with our company, the first thing that happens is the flying pilot says, my aircraft. And that's really to get everybody's mind shifted to the fact that we have a problem, but number one is someone's flying the airplane. Because it's very easy for both pilots to get distracted as to what that emergency is, and all of a sudden, no one's flying the airplane. So I think that was a very good item that the company added over time. Then, of course, you identify the problem. Make sure you both agree as to what is actually happening right here. And then execute the checklist. We follow the checklist for that particular type of emergency. But then manage it, determine a plan, communicate, and what most likely will happen is the captain will have the first officer fly the aircraft, and the captain will run the checklist and sits back and again orchestrates and manages the whole event, doing the two in, two out that was mentioned yesterday to make certain that we communicate with the passengers and the flight attendants what's going on, what the plan's going to be, and also outside the aircraft, communicating with ATC, communicating with our dispatcher. And we do have some tools that sort of streamline some of that in terms of communicating with the company, where we can do that electronically and not necessarily have to call them directly and have the conversation. Because depending on the type of emergency, obviously, we want to get that aircraft back on the ground quickly. And the type of emergency also depends on how things play out. There's certain events where we don't have to rush, we have time. It might be some sort of a hydraulic situation or other systems failure, but it could require us extra time up there to prepare for it. Looking at performance charts, figuring out flap settings, speeds, a lot of things going on. Obviously, if it's an engine fire at 400 feet, we start fighting that fire right away. We don't waste any time with that. And if the fire hasn't gone out, that just increases the urgency of being back on the ground. One other thing too that comes up from time to time, if we have an engine failure at takeoff, then we are not going to be flying the SID that we were cleared on. And depending on the terrain, the environment around the airport, it would most likely be departing straight out, and we would ask for an altitude from you to climb to. But in many cases, and Las Vegas is a great example where we have our own company engine out SIDs that we're required to fly in the event of an engine failure. And of course, that's to keep us out of harm's way with terrain. We realize in most cases, I don't think you have copies of those. They can vary from airline to airline, but we at least try to communicate to you to let you know generally what we're going to be doing if we're turning left or to a certain heading, just so you can help keep aircraft out of the way.
Great. So Jesse, from the center environment, when a pilot declares an emergency or we do it for them, what is the process that you're doing as a controller, your notifications, and kind of just walk us through briefly on what you have to do when you have an emergency and how you coordinate what you actually...
Yeah, so it always varies with the different types of emergencies, but there's always coordination. It's always going to increase our workload a little bit. So obviously the first thing we're going to do is get information from the pilot. But then we're taking that information, we're passing it back to management so they can do what they have to do. But we're also passing that information forward from controller to controller, just making sure everyone's in the loop of exactly what's going on, what the problem is, what the pilot needs, anything we need from you to make sure you have a safe landing, right? So there is a lot of coordination behind the scenes that goes on. We all know that in the control room, it's, we're fun, we're joking around, but we also know as soon as something happens, the attitude changes. It gets quiet, we're focused, everyone's helping everyone. We really solidify as a team. But so I always, normally as soon as something happens, we'll get a D-side in to assist us, right? That's, our kind of our protocol if someone's available. So they can help me with a lot of coordination. And you're hearing me talk to you, you never hear this person that is in the background doing all this extra work that has to be done during that time.
So Saja, from the terminal environment then, let's say we have an emergency at flight level 350 and Jesse's sending that aircraft your way. What are you doing in the terminal environment to
You want to
prepare
call
for
me,
that
Jesse?
aircraft?
We didn't practice this, so this is me being wild, You call me with the inbound as a TRACON, yeah.
Okay, I'd be like, Oklahoma approach, I don't know what center feeds you, but
Yeah, that's right.
Emergency, and you're gonna...
Oak City?
Yeah, I got American 123 out here. He's gonna be there in about 15 minutes, engine out. They want the trucks there, and I'll pass any information as soon as I get it. 110 people on board and 2 hours of fuel.
2 hours of fuel, 110 people on board, trucks rolled out, type aircraft?
It's a 737.
737, Roger, CX.
SJ.
That's how that sounds. And so that would be the center to TRACON call. And we got as much information as we could. And usually when Jesse's calling me, he hears what's going on in my background. But as soon as he says emergency inbound, I go, hey, supervisor, come help. And the supervisor is usually listening to the operations, but most TRACONs have multiple frequencies. So it can be kind of jarbled. So the supervisor may unkey the rest of the frequencies and listen to the frequency that's getting the emergency inbound call. So that's center to TRACON environment. Now I'm in the TRACON and I, again, work both up-down facility and say the same thing. Local radar, they answer. 15 minutes out, Boeing 737, engine out, 110 packs on board, 2 hours remaining on fuel, whatever he's told me. We do have things to write it down, so as soon as I hear emergency, I'm starting to write so that information gets passed. Now, as a tower controller, when I'm working local control, or ground control, whoever gets that call is now dispersing that information to the airport ops and authority, and that ball game looks completely different. Every airport, not every airport, but most airports are township run, so your alerts 1, 2, and 3 are going to look different at different places. Engine out, smoke in the cockpit, all alerted differently. This is so the Airport Fire Rescue, which we call ARF for short, knows where to go. There are designated spots for different types of emergencies and different types of aircraft. So again, in every environment, we want to know the nature of the emergency, the type of airplane, pilot's intentions, passengers on board, fuel remaining. That's what we need as a minimum. And so ARF then stages, and from the ground control perspective, there are different types of alerts that shut ground control down, meaning as soon as we say this alert number, I get airplanes out of the safety equipment's way and they roll. We, depending on the nature of the emergency, how far out in the terminal environment, if I got a stack of 10 people lined up to go as local control, I'm gonna try to get them out. My previous duty station was Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, along the Susquehanna. We had one runway. That was very important there. Get those airplanes out, get as many in before the emergency comes inbound, because now we're shutting down the pavement depending on the type of runway, or emergency. I work at Will Rogers now. We got 2 big old parallels on an intersecting. We do things a little differently. There's not that urgency to possibly get people moving in case the aircraft shuts the runway down.
Perfect. Go ahead, Steve.
Jesse, you when you're dealing with like an emergency like that and listening to you do that script back and forth, it's amazing. It's like, wow, you coordinated so well. You got what the points across you needed to do. What happens when you're dealing with en route weather like thunderstorms and there's only one hole we can go through? How do you work that out with everyone around you and with the other aircraft on the frequency?
So we all as controllers know weather is dynamic and difficult to deal with, and it never builds where in a convenient spot. It's always in the way. Normally it's building right where you have to coordinate with maybe 2 or 3 sectors. So every day we come in, we get our weather briefings, so we have an idea of what they're expecting the trends to be, so we can kind of start planning for it. But as we see it start popping up on the scope, we start trying to anticipate the pilot's needs. Do we think they're going to go left around it? Okay, so let's start coordinating now, maybe 15 minutes in advance if we can, to say, hey, start planning for everyone to start turning left off this departure procedure or whatever it is. But it is a lot of coordination. En route, we're lucky because we can put some of, like, if you're deviating to the left or right, we can use put that information in the data block. So it passes along to the next controller, so we don't have to verbally tell them what you're doing. But there are times when it's sometimes too busy, so we may call ahead and be like, look, for the next 20 minutes, expect everyone to be deviating up to 25 degrees to the right, and they'll be direct to the next fix on their flight plan. But it's challenging. It's a lot of work. It significantly increases our workload, stuff that from the pilots you never see in the background, because we're doing it behind the scenes for you guys. But that's another thing too, that if you guys can tell us things that you're seeing, so let's say you see a thunderstorm up there and you're like, hey, left's looking really good and it's building and that looks like for the next 20 minutes, that might be good for you guys to tell pilots, hey, keep going left around this, so we can plan for that. So we rely on you to give us that information as well, what you're seeing, to help us coordinate with other people and for the future.
That's some of that communicating for safety, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It all seems to go hand in
stuff.
hand, huh?
It's great. And the PIREPs, those are very important. Brian, from your standpoint, when you're inside the flight deck and you're deviating around weather, what's in your mind? What's the workload you're experiencing as that's happening?
Well, Jesse outlined it pretty well. Because of all the work that's going on behind the scenes, most of the time when we're looking at the weather picture on the radar and ideally in daylight conditions and above some of the weather where you can also see it outside the window, but if we are looking at the radar, most of the time there's a lot of trust and reliability that when we make that request for the deviation, more often than not, the controllers grant that. And obviously what we just heard explains why that generally happens. And we understand too, there's times where maybe we want to deviate where it's going to be in military airspace. You can't let us go that way. That does happen. And I've only had rare occurrences, excuse me, where the controller could absolutely not allow me to have that weather deviation, and of course in that event you're forced to declare an emergency because we can't penetrate that weather and risk the aircraft and passengers and crew. But overall it's pretty routine, and as you said, yes, if we see that anvil building up or other changes in the weather or have a recommendation of a better way to go, we need to relay that to you so you can pass it along.
Perfect. So I apologize, we're really short on time right now. We could probably sit up here for hours and do this, but the Slido questions, again, we're gonna be up in Skyview 5 and 6 at 1 p.m. Please, everybody come up. I believe they're serving lunch up there. I'm not positive. I'm sure Dawn will cover that once she comes back out. But like I said, we'll take all those questions with us. I believe you can still submit them. They'll all be upstairs. We'll answer all those. But I did want to take the opportunity. We have someone very special on stage with us today, Brian, Captain Brian, who just flew his retirement, his last flight a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
Sydney to LAX. So
Yeah. Thank you.
15,000 flight hours. And how long have you been doing we've been working, I mean, you and I have been working together for 7 or 8 years, but you've been doing this for over 15 years. So Brian has been just outstanding. He's a partner to us. He has been, and I just wanted everybody to recognize him and congratulate him for a career well served. And you've always been a friend and advocate to NATCA, and we appreciate everything you've ever done for us.
Well, thank you, and I think I've been coming to CFS for at least 20 years now, and yeah, I've been doing this stuff for about 25 or 26 years in terms of these activities, but I always say it, this venue has been phenomenal. The relationships that have been built over the years, this is more like a reunion for me when I come back every year and see all of you and get to work with everyone. But just one thing I want to highlight, because it was one of the highlights of my career. On that last flight, I received such heartfelt, warm send-off messages from ATC, from Oakland Oceanic, SoCal, where Jared, I think, is over there in the corner. He was working my flight, said wonderful things on the frequency, and LA Tower, and I'll tell you that hit right here, and I will always remember that. So thank you for what you've done for me over the years, and especially thank you for what you do for our pilots and having our backs out there.